Usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this comforting expectation of absolute precision.
Right, yeah, like it's engineering or something.
Exactly. Like it feels like engineering.
Yeah.
If you fall and, I don't know, break your arm, you go to the hospital, they run you through an X-ray machine, and it prints out that stark black and white image.
And there's the problem.
Right. There's a jagged white line on the radius bone, and the doctor just points at it and says, there is the problem. It's clean, it's visible. It's basically a binary state of broken or not broken.
And we crave that. I mean, we crave that kind of binary categorization.
Oh, for sure.
Because it makes the chaos of biological existence feel, well, manageable. We want to be able to point to a physical substrate and just say, here's the cause and here's the effect.
But the moment you step outside the realm of standard orthopedics or just basic biology, and you step into the world of human transcendence.
Which is a huge leap.
Right, a massive leap. When you look at the world of ancient spiritual practices, profound states of consciousness, and this sort of historical obsession with immortality, that X-ray machine suddenly seems entirely useless.
Yeah, completely obsolete.
We find ourselves looking at a diagnostic landscape that is, well, murky, to say the least. Because for thousands of years, across almost every culture on the planet, the ultimate quest of human history has been the pursuit of living forever.
Or at least transcending the normal decay of the physical body.
Right, exactly. But if you're listening to this, I want to be clear. We aren't talking about magical fountains of youth here, or fantasy novels, or finding a cursed chalice.
No magic tricks today.
No magic. We are looking at a very specific, incredibly ancient tradition, which is Daoist internal alchemy. They call it Naiden.
Right, Naiden.
And the mission of this deep dive today is to look at it through the highly rigorous, deeply unforgiving lenses of modern quantum mechanics, biophysics, and neurobiology.
And honestly, the juxtaposition of those two worlds is what makes this so incredibly compelling.
It really is.
Because when you place these esoteric, cryptic, ancient texts, I mean, manuals written by ascetics living in caves thousands of years ago.
Yeah.
When you put them right alongside peer-reviewed 21st century clinical studies, the overlap is not just interesting, it is staggering.
It's almost unbelievable.
It really is. We are pulling from Daoist manuals that detail the concept of Shengtai.
Which translates to the sacred embryo, right?
Exactly, the sacred embryo. And we are cross-referencing those texts with modern clinical research on the brain's glymphatic system, quantitative EEG brainwave patterns recorded during deep states of meditation, and the cutting-edge principles of quantum biology.
So we are basically going to map out exactly how these ancient practitioners use their physical bodies as literal functioning alchemical laboratories.
Step by step.
Step by step. Their stated goal was to transmute dense physical matter, so flesh, blood, hormones,
All right.
to transmute all of that into non-material energetic consciousness. And we are going to look at how modern science is validating the exact sequential stages they described.
Which is just wild.
It is. So as you are listening to this, the goal is that by the end of our conversation, you will eventually look at your own heartbeat, the rhythm of your breath, and the daily cycles of your hormones, not just as, like, bodily functions.
But as tools.
Right, as quantum mechanical tools that are just sitting there waiting to be utilized by you.
But to even begin mapping the biology of this, we have to look at the foundational philosophy that sets Taoism apart from almost every other global spiritual tradition.
Yeah, let's start there.
Because if you don't grasp this core contrast, the biological mechanisms we're going to discuss just won't make sense.
Let's get into that contrast then, because I think it's really easy for us to lump all Eastern spiritual traditions into one big category of mindfulness or meditation.
Well, absolutely. People do it all the time.
But reading through the history here, the source material shows that Taoism fundamentally clashes with other major schools of thought on how you actually achieve enlightenment or transcendence.
It is a radical departure. I mean, if you look at Buddhism, for example, the primary focus is the mind.
Right, it's very cognitive.
Very cognitive. It is heavily oriented around cognitive realizations, psychological states, and dismantling the illusion of the ego. The Buddhist framework basically suggests that the awakened state is already there, it's just obscured by mental defilements.
Like clouds blocking the sun.
Exactly. And then Confucianism, on the other hand, is highly pragmatic. It focuses on behavior, social harmony, ethics, and your role in society.
Okay, so where does Taoism fit in?
Well, Taoism is fundamentally categorized as a form school.
A form school.
Right. The Taoist framework dictates that you simply cannot achieve spiritual transcendence without first undergoing intense, sequential, and highly specific physical and metabolic transformations.
The physical body comes first. And the ancient Taoist texts are actually pretty blunt about this. There is a quote that stood out in the materials we looked at stating roughly, the mind can be suddenly enlightened, but daily habits and physical karma cannot be suddenly removed.
Yes, that's a crucial point.
It's this profound realization that having a spiritual epiphany doesn't suddenly cure your liver disease,
No, it doesn't.
or fix your hormonal imbalances, or rewire your central nervous system. A mental realization is, at the end of the day, just a thought.
That is the absolute crux of the Taoist approach. They treat the human body as a literal microcosm of the universe.
Which is a beautiful idea.
It is. The stars, the rivers, the weather systems, they believed all of these have a direct physiological counterpart inside the human organism. So to achieve true spiritual evolution, you have to upgrade the biological hardware.
You can't just patch the software.
Exactly. You cannot just patch the mental software. You cannot bypass the physical form. The transformation has to occur at the level of your cells, your endocrine system, your breath, and your blood.
I was actually trying to conceptualize this using a modern framework for the listener.
Oh,
Yeah, so if Buddhism is like downloading a brand new, highly efficient operating system via meditation, Taoism is saying, well, that's great, but you are trying to run a quantum computing operating system on a dusty, broken motherboard from 1995.
that is a perfect analogy.
Right. You actually need to physically rebuild the motherboard with gold wiring first.
Right.
Otherwise, the system is going to completely crash when you try to boot up the new software.
And that analogy holds up perfectly under physiological scrutiny. It really does. And that rebuilding process, the upgrading of the biological motherboard, starts at the most fundamental, dense biological level of our physical form.
Yep.
But before we get to the biology of that first step, we need to establish the vocabulary the Taoists use, which they call the three treasures.
Right, the three treasures. This is their framework for human vital force. So we have Jing, which translates to essence.
Yes.
Then there is Qi, which is vital energy. And finally, Shen, which translates to spirit.
Jing, Qi, and Shen.
But what blew my mind when looking into this is how this exact tripartite terminology shows up across the globe in cultures that literally had absolutely no contact with one another.
It's amazing. The global lexicon of vital force is one of the great mysteries of human history. Because the Taoist Jing, Qi, and Shen directly mirror the Christian trinity of body, soul, and spirit.
Wow.
And if we move to the Hindu and Vedic traditions, this aligns remarkably well with the gunas.
The gunner, that's right.
Yeah, you have tamas, which is the dense, heavy inertia corresponding to the physical body, or Jing.
Okay.
You have rajas, which is dynamism, movement, and vital energy, which corresponds to the soul, or Qi. And you have sattva, which is luminosity, purity, and consciousness, corresponding to the spirit, or Shen.
And it really doesn't stop there. Because you look at Ayurvedic medicine, the ancient Indian medical system, they have the bioenergies of Ohas, which is the deep physical vitality and immunity.
Right.
Prana, the circulating life breath.
Yeah.
And Tejas, the subtle, radiant fire of the mind. It is identical.
Yeah.
I mean, Ohas is Jing, Prana is Qi, Tejas is Shen.
The historical cross-cultural consensus is just undeniable. I mean, whether you are looking at the Greek concept of pneuma, the Hawaiian mana, the Jewish ruach, or the Indian prana, these pre-modern societies were not just making up poetic metaphors.
They were describing reality.
Yes. They were independently identifying and categorizing the exact same underlying physiological and energetic realities of the human nervous and endocrine systems.
They just didn't have the words for it.
Right. They lacked the terminology of molecular biology, so they used the language of nature, philosophy, and theology to describe metabolic states.
So if we strip away the mystical language for a second and look at the first of these three treasures, Jing, this dense physical essence, how do we define that in the context of a modern medical textbook? Like, where is Jing in the body?
Well, biologically speaking, Jing is anchored in the endocrine system. Specifically, it is intimately linked with the reproductive glands and the adrenal glands. In classical Chinese medicine, it's called the ultimate treasure, or the regenerative essence, because it is the foundational building block of human life and vitality.
So it's basically our raw fuel.
Exactly. Through the lens of modern endocrinology, Jing equates to our foundational hormonal secretions. It is the genetic potential locked in our DNA. It is the physical reproductive material, so the sperm and ova.
Right.
And on a cellular level, it is the fundamental vital force powered by mitochondrial ATP.
Let's pause and unpack ATP for a second because that term gets thrown around in high school biology class, but it's crucial here.
It really is.
ATP is adenosine triphosphate. It is literally the energy currency of your cells. I mean, every time a muscle contracts or a neuron fires or you digest food, your body is spending ATP.
Think of ATP as tiny cellular batteries. When we talk about a person having robust Jing from a biological standpoint, we are talking about a person whose endocrine system is producing a balanced, powerful cascade of hormones.
Like testosterone and estrogen.
Yeah, testosterone, estrogen, DHEA, cortisol. And a person whose mitochondria are highly efficient at producing and utilizing ATP. Their cellular batteries are fully charged, their tissues repair rapidly, and their immune system is highly responsive.
Which brings us to one of the most controversial, or I guess at least misunderstood, aspects of these ancient traditions.
Yes, the conservation aspect.
Right, because if Jing is this precious biological battery fluid, how do you preserve it? Every mystical tradition, Abrahamic asceticism, the Vedic concept of brahmacharya, the Daoist principle of no leakage, they all mandate strict sexual restraint.
They do. And the modern Western psychological interpretation of this usually defaults to a moral or puritanical framework.
Like it's a sin.
Exactly. We assume these traditions mandated celibacy because they viewed sexuality as inherently sinful or dirty. But when you read the Daoist alchemical texts, morality is barely a footnote.
Wow, really?
Yeah, the argument is almost entirely based on metabolic physics.
So they treat it like a thermodynamic equation.
They literally do. They view the production of reproductive fluids and the neurological climax of the sexual act as highly metabolically expensive processes.
Which makes sense biologically.
It does. Conserving Jing prevents the rapid depletion of the body's hormonal and endocrine reserves. The ancient texts frequently use the metaphor of oil in a lamp.
Oh, I like that.
Right. If you squander your Jing, if you are constantly burning through this deeply concentrated biological essence, you are exhausting the oil. And the flame flickers. This leads to physical fatigue, a weakened immune response, and accelerated aging.
So if you are listening to this right now and wondering how it applies to you, the underlying physiological premise is that conserving this physical essence allows the body to build a surplus of energy.
A huge surplus.
You are essentially banking raw biological fuel.
Yeah.
You are stopping the constant drain on your endocrine system so that you can stockpile this metabolic energy for the next stage of the alchemical process. But I have to push back here because modern psychology, going all the way back to Freud, argues that forced repression of fundamental biological drives is deeply unhealthy.
Oh, without a doubt.
It creates neuroses, stress, and behavioral issues. So, I mean, is Taoist internal alchemy just about gritting your teeth and forcing celibacy?
No, absolutely not. If it were just about gritting your teeth, it would be a complete failure, both spiritually and biologically. And the Taoist masters were acutely aware of this.
They were.
Yes. The texts make a massive, crucial distinction between forced suppression and true conservation. Forced celibacy without cultivating a state of deep mental emptiness is considered utterly useless and medically harmful.
Because you are fighting yourself. You are creating internal friction.
Exactly. The psychological tension of fighting a natural urge triggers the sympathetic nervous system. It spikes cortisol, it causes stress, stagnation, and what they would call energetic blockages.
Okay, so what's the alternative then?
True conservation in the Taoist model requires liberating desire through meditation. It is not about violently suppressing an urge. It is about allowing the mind to rest in a state of profound emptiness so that the Jing can pool naturally without psychological tension.
That's a huge difference.
It really is. There is a famous Taoist maxim. If the mind moves, the qi moves, and the Jing leaks.
If the mind moves, the Jing leaks. Wow.
Right. So if you are celibate, but your mind is constantly fantasizing, you are still exhausting your nervous system. You are still burning the oil in the lamp just through psychological friction rather than physical action.
That is fascinating.
You have to cultivate the mental state of non-attachment alongside the physical restraint, allowing the endocrine system to deeply rest and regenerate.
That makes a lot of sense. You're basically taking your foot off the accelerator completely, both physically and mentally.
Exactly.
So let's say a practitioner does this successfully. They meditate, they detach, they conserve. The Jing, this dense hormonal fuel, this massive surplus of ATP and endocrine reserves begins to pool.
Yeah.
What happens next? Does it just sit there in the lower abdomen? How do we get from a stockpile of hormones to an actual state of spiritual transcendence?
Well, this is the threshold where physical endocrinology crosses over into the realm of quantum field theory and thermodynamics.
Here we go.
Yeah, buckle up. Once Jing is conserved and pooled, it must be transformed. It has to be refined from a dense physical state into a lighter, energetic state. And to explain how this happens, the Daoist sources rely on an incredible biological weather system simulation.
And I found this to be one of the most brilliant conceptual models I've ever come across. They basically mapped the water cycle of the Earth directly onto human anatomy.
It is such an elegant way to describe a highly complex biophysical process.
Yeah.
So in this internal weather model, the lower abdomen, specifically a bioenergetic center located roughly 2 inches below the navel, called the lower dantian, acts as a furnace.
Okay.
You can think of the lower dantian as the sun. And the Jing, the pooled hormonal and reproductive fluids, represents water on the Earth's surface.
Right, so you have the water, which is the Jing, and you have the sun, which is the Dantian.
Through highly focused, sustained meditative concentration, the practitioner generates an internal alchemical heat. This sun warms the water.
Literally heating it up.
Yes. And as the Jing is heated by this intense mental focus, it undergoes a phase change. It evaporates into a subtle, lighter vapor, which they call qi.
The second treasure.
Exactly. This vaporized vital energy then begins to rise up the spine, much like water vapor rising into the atmosphere.
Okay, this is where I need to stop and play the skeptic for a minute,
Go for it.
because it is a beautiful metaphor.
Mm-hmm.
But we are talking about actual biology here. How does mere mental intention, literally just sitting there and thinking really hard about your lower abdomen, create actual physical heat in the body?
It's a fair question.
How does a thought evaporate a hormone? The sources bring in quantum biology and torsion fields here. But you are going to have to explain that to me like I'm a 5-year-old, because it honestly sounds like we're drifting into science fiction.
It sounds exactly like science fiction until you break down the fundamental physics of the human body. We have to remember that at our core, we are not just made of flesh and blood.
Right.
Flesh and blood are made of cells. Cells are made of molecules. Molecules are made of atoms, electrons, and protons.
Okay, I'm with you.
And all of those subatomic particles are governed by the laws of quantum mechanics and Planck's constant. We are fundamentally walking clouds of interacting quantum fields.
Okay, I am with you at the atomic level. But how does thought move an atom?
In quantum physics, there is a concept regarding torsion fields, which relates to the spin of particles. Every particle has a spin, and the spin creates a localized field.
A torsion field.
Right. When the brain engages in profound, sustained, singular focus, what the Daoists call yi, or intention, it generates a highly coherent electromagnetic field.
The brain literally produces a field.
Yes, a measurable one. And the modern biophysical hypothesis is that this coherent mental field interacts with the torsion fields of the cells in the lower abdomen.
Wait, so you are saying that a highly focused thought has a physical, measurable electromagnetic frequency that can actually push or interact with the subatomic spin of the cells in your gut?
That is exactly what the leading edge of quantum biology is suggesting. Conscious intention creates bioenergetic changes. By directing intense, coherent awareness to the lower dantian, the practitioner is altering the local torsion fields.
Wow.
This causes a phenomenon known in physics as a distortion of the vacuum at the cellular level.
The distortion of the vacuum.
Yeah, and this localized distortion restores tissue homeostasis, it increases localized blood flow, and it physically initiates the metabolic energy shifts that generate measurable internal heat.
So it's not just a feeling of heat, it's actual temperature.
Actual temperature. We see this in clinical studies of Tummo meditation in Tibetan monks who can raise their peripheral body temperature by several degrees simply through visualization and breath.
Oh, right, the guys drying wet towels on their backs in the freezing snow.
Exactly. The thought dictates the flow of blood and the firing of the nervous system, generating real thermal energy.
So when the ancient Taoists talk about using the fire of the mind to transform Jing into Qi, they are literally talking about converting dense matter into subtle energy.
Yes.
This is Einstein's mass energy equivalence, E equals mc squared, happening within the cellular matrix of the human body. The non-material energetic transformation they described thousands of years ago with poetry and metaphors is actually an advanced physical state transition occurring at the quantum level.
They were describing quantum particle transformation using the vocabulary of their time. They observed that as the body's cellular vital force, the dense Jing, is heated by the bioelectromagnetic torsion fields of conscious intention, the local molecular structures are energized.
Right.
The energy transitions into a higher frequency, less dense state, which they called qi. The water has evaporated into steam.
Okay, so the water's become steam. The quantum-heated Jing has vaporized into qi. And according to the physiological map, this qi begins to rise up the spinal column.
It moves upward, yes.
And the sources suggest that as this happens, it completely alters the body's metabolic demands, specifically targeting the respiratory system.
The influx of qi, which, by the way, directly parallels the Vedic concept of kundalini energy rising up the Sushumna Nadi, or the central channel of the spine, causes a profound physiological shift.
Okay.
As this energy fills the cellular structures, the body's reliance on the external environment drastically drops. Specifically, the need for external oxygen plummets.
The need for oxygen drops.
Plummets. This leads the practitioner into a state the classical texts call tai chi, which translates to embryonic breathing.
The claims surrounding embryonic breathing are just wild to me. The ancient texts state that advanced practitioners in deep meditative states literally stop breathing externally.
Right.
The breath becomes so subtle it completely ceases, and they breathe like an embryo in the womb. Again, biological skeptic here. How on earth does a human being stop breathing for prolonged periods without suffering from hypoxia, brain damage, and eventually death?
Well, if an average person simply held their breath, they would absolutely experience hypoxia.
Right, you'd pass out.
But the practitioner in Tai Chi is not holding their breath. Their body has undergone a massive systemic metabolic shift. The Daoists differentiate between Wai-Qi, which is external air drawn into the lungs, and Nei-Qi, which is internal vital energy.
Okay, so how does the body actually survive without Wai-Qi, the external air?
During this state, the body transitions its fuel source entirely.
How does the body change its fuel source?
In a normal state, the body relies heavily on glucose metabolism, which requires a steady, high volume of oxygen to produce ATP.
Right, burning sugar.
But as the mind quiets to an absolute standstill and the heart rate drops, the metabolic burn rate slows to a crawl. The neurobiological evidence suggests that the body optimizes a process called fatty acid oxidation, or FAO.
Fatty acid oxidation. It's kind of like a hybrid car switching from the gas engine to the electric battery.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize it. The body switches to burning stored lipids, and this FAO process is incredibly efficient.
It requires less oxygen.
Much less. It buffers against oxidative stress and regulates protein acetylation, which fundamentally protects the cellular structure from the damage normally associated with low oxygen.
Wow.
Because the metabolic demand of the brain and muscles has dropped so profoundly, the trace amounts of oxygen already in the bloodstream, combined with the internal bioelectric energy of the qi, are sufficient to maintain life.
So they just don't need to inhale.
Exactly. The physical lungs stop pumping because the internal engine no longer requires a massive influx of air.
It's fascinating how breath and thought are so intertwined. The sources also mention a neurobiological link between the cessation of breath and what they call the sixth consciousness, which refers to discriminative analytical thought, basically the chatter of the mind.
This is one of the most beautiful syntheses of ancient internal observation and modern neuroscience. The vagus nerve heavily dictates our respiratory rate, and it is intimately linked to our emotional and cognitive states.
So they are hardwired together.
Inextricably tethered to one another. You cannot have a chaotic, rapidly thinking mind without a corresponding fluctuation in the breath. When the mind achieves profound, absolute stillness, the breath naturally ceases.
This mirrors other traditions too, right?
Absolutely. It perfectly mirrors the fourth stage of pranayama in the yogic tradition outlined by Patanjali.
Oh, right.
He describes the ultimate state of breath control not as inhaling or exhaling, but as residing in the natural gap between breaths. When you reach this state, mental busyness is completely silenced. The body's life force sustains itself internally.
Think about this in the context of your own life, if you're listening. Have you ever noticed when you are deeply focused on a meticulous task? Maybe you are trying to thread a tiny needle, or you are reading an incredibly dense, complex passage in a book, or you are listening for a very faint sound in the distance. Your breathing naturally becomes incredibly shallow.
You might even hold your breath.
Yeah. Sometimes you even catch yourself holding your breath without realizing it.
Yeah.
Your body is instinctively shutting down the gross mechanical movement of the lungs to allocate all available energy and stillness to the brain's focus.
It's reallocating resources.
Exactly. This Daoist practice of Tai Chi is that exact same mechanism, just scaled up to an evolutionary alchemical level.
And this brings us to a critical inflection point in the biological journey.
Okay.
We have traced the physical essence, the jing, from the reproductive and adrenal base. We watched the practitioner heat it through intention, transmuting it into qi.
Right.
We watched that qi rise up the spine as the metabolic rate plummets and the external breath ceases. So the next logical question is, what happens when this massive concentrated wave of quantum biological energy hits the brain?
And here is where the science gets incredibly concrete, because we have extensive, peer-reviewed EEG validation for this phase.
Yes, we do.
Recent clinical studies monitoring the brainwaves of advanced practitioners in Zen, Qigong, and loving-kindness meditation show that these states drastically, physically, alter the electromagnetic patterns of the brain.
The quantitative EEG data is definitive and, frankly, paradigm-shifting. During these advanced alchemical meditative states, researchers observe a massive increase in delta wave power, which is also known as slow wave activity, or SWA.
Delta waves.
Yeah. And at the same time, there is a significant lowering of noradrenergic tone, meaning the release of stress neurotransmitters like norepinephrine comes to a halt.
Let's explain delta waves for a second, because they are key here. Normally, if you hook an average person up to an EEG, you only see dominant delta waves when they are unconscious, in the deepest, most restorative stages of dreamless sleep.
Correct. Delta waves are the slowest, highest amplitude brain waves. They are the absolute hallmark of profound physiological repair.
But these practitioners are awake.
That's the crazy part. These Daoist and Qigong practitioners are generating massive synchronous delta waves while they are sitting upright, entirely awake and consciously aware.
Wow.
They are putting the brain into a state of profound, paradoxical, deep rest while maintaining acute conscious attention.
And this specific brain state, this waking delta wave phenomenon, triggers a mechanical cleaning process in the brain called the glymphatic system.
Yes. The discovery of the glymphatic system is relatively recent in neuroscience, but it perfectly explains the ancient texts.
How so?
Well, the glymphatic system is essentially the brain's waste clearance pathway, its internal plumbing or dishwasher. When a person enters slow wave activity and their noradrenergic tone drops, specific microscopic structures in the brain change shape.
Change shape.
Yeah, that AQP4 water channels, which are located on the end feet of star-shaped glial cells called astrocytes, they physically open up.
Wait, so the brain cells actually shrink to make room?
Essentially, yes. The extracellular space expands by up to 60%.
60%?
It's massive. This opening allows cerebrospinal fluid, or CSF, to rush in and rapidly exchange with interstitial fluid, which is the fluid between the cells. This high-volume fluid exchange flushes out metabolic waste, amyloid plaques, and cellular toxins. It is a literal watching of the brain.
Let's map this modern neurobiology back onto our ancient biological weather system analogy. This is where it all clicks together perfectly.
They'll love this part.
So the chi vapor, the steam, has risen up the spine and hit the brain. The brain acts as the cool upper atmosphere in this weather model. The energy condenses in this cool environment, triggering the delta waves and the glymphatic flushing.
Condensing the steam.
Right. The steam turns back into fluid, specifically highly purified cerebrospinal fluid and powerful endocrine secretions for the pituitary and pineal glands. And then, according to the Daoist alchemical map, this fluid falls back down the front of the body, traveling down the Genmai meridian, acting as an internal rain.
It is a stunning parallel. The ancient Taoists called this the internal rain, or the sweet dew.
Sweet dew.
Yeah, they literally reported feeling a cool, restorative fluid dropping down the back of the throat and descending into the chest during deep meditation. For centuries, this was thought to be a hallucination or just a metaphor.
What's real?
We now know it perfectly describes the physiological flushing, the CSF circulation, and the cascade of neuroendocrine release facilitated by the glymphatic system.
Wait, I have a mechanical question. How does the energy get pushed up into the brain with enough force to trigger all of this in the first place? To explain the physics of this upward surge, the sources introduce a fascinating biophysical model proposed by a scientist named Itzhak Bentov.
Ah, the Bentov model.
I had to read this section like 3 times to fully grasp it because it involves acoustic physics.
Bentov's model is a masterpiece of biophysics. He wanted to understand the mechanical reality of the kundalini, or qi, rising up the spine. He proposed that during deep meditation, when the breath becomes shallow or ceases, a very specific cardiovascular resonance occurs.
Okay, walk me through it.
The heart beats, pushing blood down the aorta, the main artery. This blood hits the aortic bifurcation, which is the place in the lower abdomen where the artery splits to go down each leg.
So the blood hits that fork in the road and bounces back.
Exactly. It creates a pressure wave that travels back up toward the heart. Normally, this rhythm is erratic because our breathing is erratic.
Right.
But when a practitioner enters Tai Chi and the breath is perfectly still, the primary heartbeat and this returning pressure wave synchronize. They form what is called a standing wave in physics.
It's kind of like plucking a guitar string so that it vibrates perfectly in place.
Yes, exactly like that. And this powerful rhythmic standing wave travels up the spine. It causes a physical, measurable, rhythmic micromotion of the skull.
Wait, the skull is actually moving, like vibrating.
Microscopically, yes. Roughly a few thousandths of an inch, the entire skull begins to act like a tuning fork.
That is insane.
And this mechanical micromotion generates acoustical and electrical plane waves inside the fluid-filled ventricles of the brain. The brain is essentially being stimulated by a continuous, localized acoustic wave.
So it's basically massaging the brain with sound waves.
Essentially.
Right.
And this mechanical vibration of the brain tissue creates a localized electrical field. It literally electrifies the neural environment.
This is unbelievable. The Bentov model physically, mechanically validates the ancient claim that the dense energy of qi, as it rises up the spine, is refined and electrified in the brain.
It does.
It is physically vibrating the cerebrospinal fluid, transforming the bioenergy into the third and final treasure, Shen, which translates to pure light or spirit.
And just like that, we have reached the final stage of the chronological biological sequence.
The ultimate goal.
Right. The internal rain has fallen, the brain has been highly electrified, washed, and cleansed by the glymphatic system. We arrive at the ultimate product of this exhaustive internal laboratory, the manifestation of Shen and the subsequent creation of the immortal fetus, or Shengtai.
This is where the physiological deeply, inextricably intertwines with the spiritual. The physical hormones, the Jing, became the energetic vapor, the Qi. And now the Qi has been refined into Shen.
The pure spirit.
The text describes Shen as a highly organized, non-material quantum consciousness field. But before we get to the physics of this immortal fetus, we need to contrast this final stage with Buddhist philosophy again. Understand just how unique the Daoist approach is.
It is a critical distinction to make. In mainstream Mahayana Buddhism, there is the concept of Tathagata Garbha, which translates roughly to the inherent Buddha nature.
Okay.
The Buddhist teaching suggests that enlightenment, or the pure spiritual state, is already present within everyone. It is like a gold statue buried in the mud.
So you don't have to build the gold statue, you just have to wash away the mud.
Exactly. You just have to realize it is there through cognitive realization and letting go of illusions.
But Taoism fundamentally disagrees with that premise. The Taoists say, well, no, there is no gold statue buried inside you. There is only raw dirt, water, and fire.
Precisely. Taoism teaches that immortality and the refined spirit body do not inherently exist waiting to be found. They are not a default human condition.
You have to earn it.
You have to build it. The Shengtai, the sacred embryo, must be actively constructed, gestated, and birthed through strict, grueling biological and energetic effort. It is an act of creation, not an act of discovery.
Well,
It requires the physical raw materials of Jing and Qi to build it. If you do not do the alchemical work, the Taoists say the Shen simply scatters at death.
the texts describe this building process as Tudai Wangu, which translates to rebirth from the original fetus and bones. It is wild.
It's an internal cloning process, essentially.
Yeah, the practitioner uses their own internal yin and yang energies, basically the polarized electromagnetic currents of their own body, to essentially auto-G state.
Right.
Over a metaphorical period of 10 months, which mirrors human pregnancy, they use their focused intention to grow an immortal fetus inside the alchemical furnace of the lower dantian.
And this culmination is deeply profound. Once the Shengtai is fully formed, nourished by the internal rain, and electrified by the resonance of the nervous system, it results in the yang spirit leaving the physical body.
Leaving the body.
Yes. The Daoist texts describe this as a literal energetic double, an immortal spiritual body that has been refined directly from the biological substrates of ATP, endocrine hormones, and cerebrospinal fluid.
So, bringing this all back down to earth for a second, what does this actually mean? Because the ancient Taoists looked inward and described a glowing, energetic clone escaping the crown of the head to roam the universe freely.
Right, which sounds like myth.
It sounds like pure myth. But modern physics looks at the exact same phenomenon and describes it as a localized, highly coherent quantum field generated by sustained, synchronized electromagnetic brain-heart coherence.
It's the same thing.
We are talking about the exact same thing. What was once dismissed as primitive magic or myth is simply incredibly advanced biophysics that we are only just now beginning to have the tools to measure.
It forces us to entirely reconsider the boundaries of human physiology, doesn't it?
It really does.
Because when we view the creation of the Shengtai through the lens of quantum particle theory, it is the ultimate non-material energy shift. The practitioner has systematically dismantled their normal metabolic function, reorganized their cellular energy, and condensed it into a coherent, independent, energetic structure.
They've hacked their own biology.
They have theoretically built a localized quantum field capable of sustaining consciousness outside the biological host.
Let's recap this incredible journey, because the linear sequence they mapped out thousands of years ago is absolute, and it has been validated step by step today.
It's quite the map.
First, you have to conserve your dense physical essence, your Jing, your hormones, your ATP, through strict behavioral restraint and profound mental emptiness.
That's found.
Second, you heat that raw biological fuel with conscious intention and breath control, transmuting it into the energetic vapor of Qing through quantum bioenergetic torsion fields. Third, as the external breath stops, you push that vaporized energy up the spine into the brain, utilizing the acoustic standing waves of your own heartbeat to trigger waking delta waves and massive glymphatic flushing.
Step 3.
And finally, from that electrified, purified state, you gestate and birth a highly organized quantum consciousness field, the Shen, the immortal fetus.
It is a complete systemic biological metamorphosis. We have traveled from the densest endocrine secretions in the reproductive glands to the most ethereal, non-local spiritual light. And we have seen how modern endocrinology, neurobiology, and quantum physics can validate the mechanics of every single step.
It brings us right back to that X-ray machine we talked about at the very beginning.
Right.
The diagnostic landscape of human potential isn't broken, and it isn't magic. We just haven't been using the right imaging tools to see what the ancient Daoists saw clearly thousands of years ago.
Well said.
I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as you go about your day. Every single time you take a breath and every single time your heart beats against your chest, you are generating microelectrical currents.
You are a power plant.
Exactly. Your body is a humming, vibrating quantum power plant. If ancient ascetics in caves could map this system well enough to harness that subtle energy and literally try to build an immortal energy body, what latent, untapped evolutionary potential is sitting inside your cells right now, just waiting for you to quiet your mind, optimize your biology, and finally pay attention.
Something to think about.
Thank you for joining us on this incredibly deep dive into the true science of immortality.